Welcome to the Doomscroll News Report here on Radio Taiwan International, where I, Hanna Belinsky, and my co-host,
Amanda Stevens,
two writers, political by necessity, cover some of the biggest international news stories dominating our news feeds from the last week. I'm Hanna Belinsky, and this week we're talking about scams. Specifically, the Cambodian scam center run by the Prince Group, now defunct, thankfully, and about a pickpocketing ring targeting people right here in Taiwan, as well as the extraordinarily popular weight loss drugs Wegovy and Ozempic, and what the expiration of the patent on their main compound, semaglutide, may mean for the population of India and broadly the world. So, a story came out recently that a pickpocketing ring might be targeting Taipei's metro line. Yeah. And that really caught my attention because it's not something you typically have to worry about here. So whoever thought to do it was kind of smart because most Taiwanese people are probably sitting ducks due to the relative rarity of having something of yours stolen in this country. Like, this is the kind of place where even when you leave something valuable unattended, people tend not to touch it. Amanda, I'm sure you know exactly what I'm talking about.
I have two stories as an example.
Oh, do tell.
One of them was when I was a manager back at a chain school. I had a teacher call me in a panic because they'd been taking their important government documents somewhere, dropped their passport. They couldn't find it.
Not the passport.
On the way, walking back. So I was busy, but I called them and I was like, walk back and see if you see it anywhere on the road or if somebody has put it on the side of the road.
Yeah.
That was exactly what had happened. Somebody had picked it up and just put it nicely on top of like the power cover things. Yeah. So it was just like sitting by the side of the road. Then they had moved it up so that it would be highly visible.
Yes, that's typical of lost items. People will like deliberately set it somewhere such that it won't be trampled and you can see it.
Steps.
Yeah.
I found somebody's wallet on New Year's Eve like 5 years ago. When I was walking back, it was just like it had fallen out of their pocket, clearly like in the post office.
Yeah.
That's where the ATMs were.
Yeah.
I opened it up to check like if anything had been stolen because there was a police station right across the street.
Yeah.
And like inside there was still like $4,000. I saw his identification information. So I walked it over to the police station myself. But it was just like sitting in the middle. It was a kind of popular road too. So it was just like sitting out easily visible in the middle of this like little ATM station.
Yeah, people are so nice about that kind of thing
So
here.
in this kind of environment, it really is easy for bad attitudes and bad actors to completely take advantage of that.
Definitely. So I grabbed the details for this particular story from a Taiwan news article from last Monday. Basically what happened was on March 11th, a woman rode the Brown Line for about 15 minutes, and after getting off the train, she received a string of notifications from her bank saying she had made a bunch of overseas transactions with her credit card. She searches her bag, wallet is gone. Off she goes to the police to file a report, and it turns out the purchases were made in Saudi Arabia, about 90,000 NT worth, or roughly 2,800 US dollars. Plus, she had 13,000 NT in her wallet, so that's about $400 gone.
Important to remind everyone that Taiwan is still largely a cash-based society.
Yes.
So that's not super crazy because maybe she was going to pay rent or something. Who knows?
Police think it's possible that an international pickpocketing ring was responsible for stealing her wallet, then sending the credit card data to an accomplice based abroad to make the purchases. And bank personnel who were interviewed by media said that this could potentially be a new method of exploiting stolen credit cards because normally when things like this happen, it's kind of random. But in this case, it was so fast and it happened so efficiently that it suggests the possibility of organized crime. And then, of course, if you're abroad, that makes it much harder to actually catch or prosecute anyone. Last week, I wrote a couple of stories for the News Shift about how Taiwan's trying to figure out how to respond to AI-driven crime, and the same issue arose. A lot of the people committing these crimes are overseas, and therefore they're outside of Taiwan's legal jurisdiction.
Yeah.
And it got me thinking about how commonplace frauds and scams have become in general, through all kinds of means, but especially with the use of AI tools now. Do you find this to be a very scammy time in our lives? Is the world scam maxing, fraud maxing?
Scam maxing. I don't know if it's a scammier time than it ever was, right?
You think so?
Well, yeah, because like
I think it's just taken a different shape, kind of.
For example, like in New York, where because of the insurance laws, people would like, you know, the dark millennial joke all Americans make about throwing themselves in front of a bus. People would do that because the way that the laws were, like you could file basically like a fraudulent claim of like workplace injury against the state and like win. For that like few years where that was a thing, like it was so commonplace that it's like the equivalent of somebody standing at an intersection and just throwing their bike into the road and being like, you hit me.
Yeah.
I don't know that it is necessarily a scammier time.
I think I recall at least one person at my university who got their tuition covered because they got hit by a bus on campus, or hit by a vehicle on campus, not a bus,
unrelated.
A car.
The only person I know who owns their home right now is somebody who rides a motorcycle, was hit by a car. And
there you
insurance
have it.
Money.
How
that
about
being
that?
said,
that's not really a scam, though. It's something else.
Not a scam. That was a real thing. It's unrelated, right? What I do think there has been like an uptick in is influencer or relationship style scams. And by that, I also mean, I noticed that you already mentioned it in your script, so I don't want to get too much into it. But that idea of like emails and it was like callers and it was like, don't trust somebody who you know you don't call.
Yeah.
But now it's so much easier to be connected to so many people all the time and to form those sort of, I don't know that I would even say parasocial relationships, but like online friendships.
Yeah.
That really do mean something. Now there's also that influence of like bad actors and people who are taking advantage of it, and I feel like that style of scam is very popular right now, along with other more intimate types of relationship scams, whether that's a parasocial scam, a actual like partner relationship scam, or sometimes it's even a best friend.
Yes. Well, all of this amounts to a ton of lead up to what I really wanted to talk about today, which is the existence of a whole cyber scam industry. The first of which I learned about being the Prince Group that was based out of Cambodia and that was finally taken down, allegedly, hopefully, toward the end of 2025. Between 2015 and 2025, the Prince Group was behind a whole network of illegal operations and scam compounds in a coastal city of Cambodia called Sihanoukville. I'm trying my best.
Allegedly.
It appeared to be in legitimate things like real estate, financial services, airlines, but behind the scenes, Prince Group was one of Asia's largest transnational criminal organizations, and it was running forced labor scam compounds across Cambodia where trafficked workers were coerced into executing pig butchering, cryptocurrency fraud schemes that stole billions from victims worldwide.
We'll define that kind of scheme in a second here.
Yes. The compounds functioned as basically violent forced labor camps surrounded by high walls and barbed wire, and they also ran phone farms or automated call centers that used thousands of phones and millions of numbers to contact victims via social media and messaging apps. It actually ended up being the United States Department of Justice that ended up taking its founder Chen Zhi down, and in January of this year, he was finally arrested and extradited back to China. As far as the seized funds, the DOJ might have run its own scam, but that's a whole nother story. The scary thing is this isn't even the only scam center operation. Myanmar scam centers may be holding 100,000 trafficked people, and Laos has become a haven for transnational crime syndicates running these sorts of online fraud and scamming schemes as well. Victims are lured in thinking they've landed a real job as like a customer service rep, and then they end up basically enslaved. What do you think it is about Southeast Asia that makes it so attractive to anyone looking to host a scam operation?
It's so sad and so scary for the people who get lured into these kind of things.
It's horrific.
Like, it can seem very legitimate.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Especially now that we have like all of these AI things that I feel like make it easy to fake a lot more. What makes it so easy? I think the two articles that we're providing on this, which will be in our show notes from The Guardian, I think do a good job of proving how, at least in the countries that The Guardian covered, but I think also, I don't know enough about Laos, but I would make this educated guess. All these countries are in a state of internal turmoil.
Yeah, it's
where
a bit chaotic.
It's difficult for them to keep a hold on things like crime rings
Mm-hmm.
or the idea that like the system is already corrupt.
Yeah.
So it's easier for them to grease the wheels to not be acknowledged.
Yeah.
So The Guardian covered both Myanmar, which you mentioned, and Cambodia. In Cambodia, one of the biggest problems is the fact that the system itself is quite corrupt.
Yes.
And so Chin Tzu was able to get away with it because he immediately made friends with very high-profile people. He bought himself legitimacy, literally. That's in the article. He gets himself essentially the title of a lord, and he helps out with philanthropic donations that can hide the underbelly of what he's doing. Yeah. Honestly, it's the same scheme that like the Yakuza has been known to run in Japan.
Yeah.
They have the philanthropic side and a darker criminal side.
It's easy, I think, to do something crooked in a country where the government's already kind of crooked.
Well, and in Myanmar, as the other example, the scam centers are largely ignored because Myanmar has been embroiled in a civil war.
Yes,
and Myanmar, those scam centers, although nobody really likes them, right? It brings in a lot of money to the country. And in fact, it's like a supporting leg of the country's GDP.
Which is
because
nuts.
of how much money it makes. But also when you consider the fact that they're usually scamming people in other richer countries like the United States or England or Australia.
Yeah.
Of course, any amount of money that they make, and these people are given crazy targets like $30,000 a month they have to steal. That is going to be worth a lot more locally where they're from. And the gangs then supply militant groups, which then support this ongoing conflict. So if you were to take them out or you were to try and move against them, that immediately destabilizes the country even more. And so the answer, like why Southeast Asia, it's not just Southeast Asia. The articles do make a point of noting that these scams are expanding into other countries.
Yeah.
But I think what you'll see is that they're typically going to be expanding into, you know, countries where they could get away with it because the government is unwilling or unable to crack down on them, regardless of how like the regular people feel.
So earlier I mentioned one of the main types of frauds they use is something called pig butchering.
Yeah.
So what that is a scammer spends weeks or maybe even months building a fake relationship with a target, fattening up the pig, basically. Then they introduce them to a fraudulent crypto platform that appears to generate real returns. And once the target has invested, they try to withdraw and they find the money is gone. Yeah. And this is so interesting to me because, like you said earlier, it preys in part on people's loneliness. And this relationship building part is something I could easily see being offloaded to AI too.
Oh, absolutely.
Which, I mean, it already has some very lonely people falling in love with chatbots.
Right.
So protections can be put in place for detecting AI or freezing large transfers. But then there's this social aspect, which is much more difficult to control. Do you think people are more lonely, more isolated, and more vulnerable to these kinds of scams than ever before? Or is this just revealing something that has always been inherent to modern society?
What I can say is I feel like a lot of people definitely, I'm gonna borrow some ideology talking points from actually like my boyfriend.
Go ahead.
Something that he brings up a lot is that he feels like society and interests and culture have become more like atomized. So smaller, more separate, more niche, and disconnected from everything else. And I think one way that we see that is in culture sort of becoming a monoculture.
Yeah.
All the music starts to resemble itself.
Right.
All the fashion starts to resemble itself.
Yeah, I've been seeing this word monoculture a lot more.
Right. And that might seem kind of like it's the opposite of what's happening if everybody's getting into these microcultures. But if everybody has a niche micro-atomized culture that's removed from everybody else, you're not getting these big cultural groups.
Yeah.
An easy example, though maybe not necessarily a healthy one, would be in high school, you would have the goths, the preps,
right.
whatever, the jocks. And
Sure.
it's like that's a single cultural group, and you can find cultural identity in that.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to kind of find or identify yourself with a cultural community or even like a hobby community now, or harder than it felt in like the early days of the internet.
Yeah.
When that's kind of like what everybody was doing. And I think that sort of makes its way into other areas of life as well. People are finding it harder to date in person. So the time we're in right now is a time we don't really know how to reconcile being overconnected and yet not really belonging to any of those places that we feel connected to.
So basically,
in like a meaningful way.
We need to go back to forums.
Forums, I think, help in part, but double-edged sword, you know, because like 4chan's still out there.
That's not that kind of forum.
I wish that forum had died out.
Forum.
And they're going to come for me now that I've said that. But, you know.
We've been talking a lot about fattening somebody up, but now I would like to talk about slimming them down. Literally, with the help of a little molecule called semaglutide, the one that makes the weight loss drugs Ozempic and Wegovy work. So this drug is and has been very popular for quite a while now. Now, technically, Ozempic is meant for treating type 2 diabetes, and Wegovy is for chronic weight management. How it works is it tells the pancreas to release insulin in response to blood sugar, it suppresses glucagon, which would otherwise raise blood sugar, and it slows gastric emptying. So food leaves your stomach more slowly, you feel full longer, and it tells your brain to reduce appetite and food cravings. So you also just don't think about food as often. All this through one weekly injection. It's become pretty much the best non-surgical intervention for weight loss. And I've been wanting to bring it up on the program for a while now just because I think it's so interesting. But before we go on, can I ask how you found out Ozempic was a thing?
I actually don't remember how I found out Ozempic was a thing.
It just kind of appeared in public consciousness.
Feels like it just suddenly started becoming a thing in conversations, especially in movies and media and literature and things like that. You sort of get folded into the gossip columns a little bit because that's where you find interviews.
Yeah, that's the thing, because I first heard it mentioned, and I would wager a lot of people did, a few years ago in the context of celebrities who were getting off-label prescriptions for it and becoming much thinner in a short period of time. And since then, it has seemed like a lot of celebrities and politicians and other public figures were getting that Ozempic look to them. The most shocking one recently being Kelly Osbourne, who is unrecognizable now from the chubby girl we once knew from MTV.
I looked this up because of your script.
And it's scary.
Was shocking.
It's scary.
It was shocking.
Now, that said, I think her weight loss is probably also the result of grief from her father's passing and probably from disordered eating. But it just goes to show how effective the drug can be, how quickly and how dramatically it can change someone's appearance, and how it can be abused. But we'll get to that. It is first and foremost a drug for treating type 2 diabetes, and as of Friday, March 20th, the patent for semaglutide expires in India, where more than 77 million people have type 2, and it's also one of the world's largest populations of overweight adults. Overweight and obesity being a risk factor for the development of type 2, as well as heart disease and certain cancers.
So many different things.
Access was more limited before by expense, but now Indian drug makers will have the green light to proceed with developing more affordable generics. That said, one of the things about generics making Ozempic more accessible is there's a greater risk of misuse, abuse, and less than stellar regulation because, like any drug, it comes with side effects. And not everybody is necessarily going to be motivated by the health effects of maintaining a lower weight. I'd say probably a great many are more interested in getting a slimmer body. Yeah. And the pursuit of vanity can be harmful, sometimes deadly. So when a drug that is this powerful becomes suddenly easier to obtain, who should take responsibility for how it ends up being used?
It's another doozy, I think, right? It becomes a nuanced question very quickly. My first thought is the responsibility lies with who is the drug provider.
That's what I think too. But it's the doctor, right?
If it's something that a doctor prescribes, however, if it's available over the counter, then I think that the responsibility also then lies with how is the drug being advertised and what how is it being pitched? Because if it were an over the counter medicine, I think you're responsible for advertising not as and I got these words from the article that you linked, which was very in depth, and it really kind of made me think a lot about different factors.
It's pretty neat, right?
But you need to make sure that it is not advertised as a get skinny quick. Because as amazing as Ozempic is, and while it has been used to assist, the reason it's used in treating type 2 diabetes is because diabetes runs in my family, so I know about this.
Mine too.
Yay!
Yes.
So, but if you are overweight, or if you're even maybe not overweight, but you're or not obese, right? But you might just be slightly overweight. That can cause a lot more complications when you're on diabetes, and so you need to drop weight fast, because you're now going to have to just manually manage your blood sugar, which is easier when you have more control over how your body functions in general and how much you're eating.
I think there's also something to be said for getting back to baseline so
Yes.
that exercising is easier and then maintaining is easier.
However, when you're doing it for a diabetic treatment, you're doing it with the oversight of a doctor.
Right.
Which is really important
Very,
because,
very.
again, the idea is not necessarily just for you to get skinny. Although I don't necessarily think that that's a bad goal, but we'll get to that with the next question.
Right.
The important thing with all of these weight loss things is like, for whatever reason you want to get skinny, just about every like get thin quick scheme is dangerous.
Yeah,
it's really
not good
dangerous
for you.
for you. And so who is responsible when these become more widely available? One, I think it's great if they become more widely available. We'll get into it in a second. But if it remains a prescription drug, then it is up to the person who's providing it to you.
Yeah.
If those people don't have a license, I think they have to be able to be sued,
Totally.
or they have to know how much they're on the hook for like irresponsibly prescribing it. And if it's available over the counter, or even if it's available both, I do think that the manufacturers have some responsibility for like, how are you selling this to people?
Yeah,
Are you selling it with
absolutely.
like realistic expectations for how much change they can expect, and like for how much of a miracle or not quite miracle cure this is?
So all these ethical concerns aside, I think there's also something interesting to be said here on the cultural side of things about how the rise of Ozempic has seemingly obliterated the discussion about fat positivity and body positivity that I recall having a fair bit of cultural momentum about a decade ago. Like there was a minute there in the 2010s. I felt like we were all coming to terms with our bodies just looking the way they do, all sizes being beautiful and so forth. Then suddenly semaglutide hits the scene and it takes us right back to heroin chic. Do you think anyone was really making peace with their bodies if they were, in the end, so eager to push the get skinny button once it was placed before them?
I think several different things happen at once. I think, again, COVID happened. And
Yeah.
suddenly we have a ton of people who even like who had a routine and were in a healthy place.
And it was ruined.
And it's ruined, and you're now in a place where like maybe you've never been in your life because you were sick or something else, and you're not really sure how to recover from it. And that can be really devastating to your self-esteem, right? But also on top of that, I feel like the body positivity movement was good, but I also feel like I recently saw a body positivity influencer kind of come out and do an interview, and she said that like it's not that she doesn't like her body, but she realized that she sort of was leaning so far into body positivity that she wasn't necessarily taking steps to guard her health.
Sure.
And some of her friends in the movement died from
Oh,
complications from being overweight. And so she came out as saying like, you need to love your body, but you also need to make sure your body
that is
works,
a pretty major
that your
reality
heart, like,
check.
beats.
Yeah.
But then people were really upset with her because they were like, that's so
Right.
anti-positivity. And she was
Yeah.
like, I'm not trying to be anti-positivity. I'm trying to like also like I'm thinking about myself and thinking about my friends. And then on the other hand, I feel like something that we should remember is like when we talk about losing weight, it gets really quickly caught up in moral arguments.
Totally.
Like
It's
if
all
you don't
about
do it
like
the
self-control.
right way,
Right.
you're kind of like a bad person. But the other thing is like the food that we eat today like doesn't fight fair.
Oh, and it doesn't.
People make food, like manufacturers are making food to be addictive.
Yeah, they
on
are.
multiple levels, like psychologically, taste-wise, chemically.
Everything
and
seems to be made to be addictive
to be like
these days.
craveable, right? And that
Right.
sounds like it's a scheme, but it's not really because like think of it. There's like the Lay's, like bet you can't have just one.
Oh, yeah.
And like you can look at it now.
They come right out and say it.
Right. I don't necessarily think that Lay's has like a ton of additives and it's like chemically tricking you, but on some level it kind of is.
Sure.
Right. And they're not the only ones who do this. There's a lot of like information, misinformation about this, but I think most people could agree. We know, for example, a lot of foods today are meant to like they're packaged to be approachable and snackable. They are
Yeah.
not necessarily packaged for your health. They
It's
are
for
not meant to be
convenience.
healthy. It's for
Yeah.
convenience and it's for profit. And it's preying off of the fact that you will like this enough to want to eat it all the time. When you
Right.
eat it all the time, you'll buy it all the time. And when you buy it all the time,
We make
they'll
money.
make money. Right.
Yeah.
So the food companies don't play fair. So
true.
I do feel like having something to help people at least get a head start
Mm-hmm.
on weight loss. Because the other thing is like, it's really hard to lose weight if you're already overweight because
Yeah.
your body cannot do the exercises
Right.
that a lot of people on the internet will be telling you to do. You need a little bit more empathy.
Yeah.
And for ourselves and for other people, I guess is kind of my answer. I don't know if we were making peace with how we looked. I hope heroin chic doesn't become the new look.
It better not come
Because
back.
I think that was also bad.
That is
for the
not,
record.
That should not be aspirational for anyone. Well, that's it for today's news report. A quick reminder that you can find all of our referenced articles in the show notes for today's episode. I'm Hannah Belinsky.
I'm Amanda Stevens.
Thanks for joining us on air today. Tune in tomorrow for more programs by Radio Taiwan International. And in the meantime, remember to stop scrolling eat some whole foods, and touch grass. We'll see you next week.
Bye.